Welcome, dear fans, to episode 46 of All the Horrible Things.
Very special episode. I know it's your favorite holiday. It's
Huge fan of presidents.
President's Day is one of the holidays.
President? Who's your main one?
Presidents. I mean, you kind of want to go with Lincoln, but
It's hard not to go with Lincoln. That's why, because the two of the movies we're going to talk about here have Lincoln in it. One is the good guy and one is the bad guy.
right. And as a kid, I did a book report on Ulysses S. Grant, and I was a fan of his for a while until turned out like he was a raging alcoholic.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
But he was on the right side of history, so
Correct.
let's give him his trespasses.
Yeah.
I don't know if I have a favorite one either. Probably Obama, I guess, just because he's of a recency bias, with the exception of the Flint water incident. Let's not talk about that.
We won't talk about that. But, there are some presidents who deserve movies about them just because of how interesting their lives are. Like Teddy Roosevelt was a very interesting character. And for a long time, Hollywood was rumored to be making a Teddy Roosevelt movie starring Leonardo DiCaprio.
That would be cool.
Yeah.
You're right. He has, him and maybe FDR left such a mark in terms of, sculpting our country as it kind of is today-ish,
Yeah.
You got to give those two big credit. What were you scoffing at?
I was just about to say there is a movie about FDR.
Oh, that's right.
We're not going to
watched a little, though, right? FDR, he was, badass or something? Super badass?
Something like that, yeah, FDR.
Badass is in the title, FDR, badass. American badass.
Yeah, and the cast is really fun. They're all actors you would recognize, from the 80s. What's his name? Bruce McGill, who was on MacGyver and in Animal House, and he was in it. But the humor in it, it was more of a comedy. And it's, we could have covered it because I guess they talk about werewolves, but the movie's a little all over the place, and it's about werewolves. When they bite you, they give you polio.
Oh, my goodness.
And that's how...
Honestly, this is the first movie I think we didn't follow through on that we had set to watch, Because you said, how far did you get? 15, 20 minutes?
Yeah, something like
and
that.
Then you
I got
scared me off.
I got to a scene where, it's riddled with just, not even innuendos, but just sexual jokes and implications. It's obviously a parody of the man's life to an extreme. It's, the guy kills a werewolf in the beginning of the movie, but the jokes aren't even top level jokes. And I've got a problem when jokes aren't smart jokes, okay, so let's look at a movie like Scary Movie. It's a parody of Scream, but the jokes are good.
Yes, the way that moves, the performances, it's top tier comedy, even though it is a parody. Yeah. It's hilarious all on its own.
And they still found a way to do intelligent jokes while at the same time, kind of doing
getting in the fart
brow.
jokes.
Yeah.
Yes, along with, some sophisticated innuendos and such.
Yeah.
I completely agree. I'm never going to watch that FDR. Him and werewolves seems like such strange bedfellows, but I guess since you mentioned the polio thing, is that how you get polio? Is it through
I don't think
transmission of fluids?
I don't believe so. I don't know, and we're not
I don't
doctors.
know either. I'm immune to polio. I got the shot when I was a baby.
Yeah. It
Good.
was just,
I
don't think it would have, it would have been too far, into the comedy realm. It was more of a comedy horror than a horror comedy, so it just wasn't worth covering for our podcast.
So, because essentially we are going to talk about one that doesn't seem to know that it's a comedy, and that's actual President's Day, I would feel like, because the only way to watch it and tolerate it is to kind of hate watch it. That's kind of how I got through it, because, we'll talk about that in a second, but I did want to mention who I think would be a great president to set a horror around, and it would be Truman, because isn't he the most murderous of all presidents with those 2 bombs? Hasn't he killed more than anybody? I don't know how many people died in, the Revolutionary War, but you can just give that credit to those atomic bombs to Truman. It was him alone that murdered all those people,
I hear
I mean, we
you.
didn't drop the bombs themselves, but it was up to him whether it happened. So in terms of a singular stroke of murder, Truman takes the cake.
Yeah, it. That's yeah. I mean, it's a monstrous thing to have done.
Yes, right.
And you're right.
Uh,
That is.
and there are movies about Truman, and I know Gary Sinise has played him, and he comes off so like innocent and aw shucksy, but then he goes and like murders so many people.
Yeah.
Yeah, but let's talk about these three movies. So we got President's Day, and then we're going to talk about the blockbuster Abraham Lincoln Vampire Slayer.
I think.
Is
Hunter?
it Slayer of Vampires?
Vampire Hunter.
Vampire Hunter.
It
Okay.
could have been either, though. I mean, because he is a slayer of vampires.
And this was 2012, so
Yeah.
you can let it slide because Buffy had been over for a decade at that point.
Right.
Because, I mean, honestly, it was a little annoying when you got that same sort of label
Sure.
there after a name, you know? But
I will
Well, let
say
it slide.
this was also based off of a book.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Interesting.
It was a book,
Okay.
and I believe Tim
Uh,
Burton is the producer on it.
Well, that makes sense because the dark angles in it are actually decent. Like, I didn't love this movie, but I'm looking forward to talking about what did work in it when we
Yeah.
get there.
Yeah.
And then finally, at the end of the cast, we're going to talk about a Masters of Horror episode from season 2 called The Washingtonians. So we got
Yeah.
2 Abraham Lincolns, and we got one that's rooted in the lore of old George Washington.
It's certainly a fun take on it, like creating lore. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. The idea is fun, and that was actually based on a short story, too, that got turned into that episode. But
Gotcha. Well,
I
let's-
digress. Let's talk
Yeah.
President's Day.
Let's talk President's Day. This movie, I think, has potential to be a good slasher movie. It's missing a lot of key things that go into feature films. Good direction, good writing, and good
Production value, 100%.
acting. Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't have any of those.
No.
The only thing that kind of redeems it a little bit are these micro roles that the characters commit to these really silly characters where it's still bad acting,
Oh,
but they're, I don't know, they're transcending the awfulness of what movie they're in. Sort of.
now,
I'm
just-
specifically talking about this big old janitor in it who caught my
Scene
heart, even though
stealer.
he is a scene stealer, even
he's
though
a
he's
scene stealer.
kind of the red herring. You'd think he was maybe the killer in this. I gotta say, I didn't see the killer coming.
Agreed.
That caught me off guard, and I don't know if like in a good way because I wasn't sure. The motive made a lot of sense, but
yeah, was it accidentally good, the reveal? Now,
yeah,
I will say I had to watch this movie in 2 different chunks because the opening they're pulling out tricks here. When you have within 5 minutes of the movie you've already got a young woman who's removed her shirt. You're almost tricking an audience into being like,
now that's a hook, baby. That's an
Right.
attention getter right there.
right.
Agreed. And then when we're having like 5 minutes worth of looking just at the hallways of the school and the lockers, I don't know how many times they just had shots of the lockers. It brought me back to Skinamarink, honestly,
Yeah.
there for a moment at the beginning.
It's
with how much
definitely
they-
one of those things that you're
well-
like, they may not have hit the actual time limit for a feature film, and they had to fill.
Yes, I could see that.
Like a feature film needs to be
Because-
over 80 minutes, I believe, or over 70 something.
Right. And that's because there's really very little characterization
Right.
beyond very, very stock characters, right? The way I kind of like looked at this is a bad election, the movie Election with Matthew Broderick and Reese Witherspoon.
Oh,
If
yeah,
you
yeah,
were to
yeah.
turn that into a horror, that's kind of what it is, because this revolves around an election.
Yeah,
Or
student
who's
body.
going to be the president of the school, the student body president. What a beautiful tie into President's Day. But, of course, there is an Abraham Lincoln masked killer on the loose, just taking out people that are involved in this process of who is going to become
Yeah.
the
And
student body president.
And I have to say, one of the first kills, I mean, after the opening scene, one of the first kills by Abraham Lincoln is a woman in a wheelchair, a young girl in a wheelchair.
Oh my goodness, that scene
just
was
brutal.
something else. I mean, yeah. First of all, they didn't give her any sort of development at all. All it
No.
was red-haired girl in wheelchair, and the way that Lincoln is stalking her, and then she climbs out of the chair and like pulling herself up the railing on the
She should have
stairs.
went
It
down
was
the
so
stairs.
cringy.
Yeah.
It was so cringy.
She needed to decide whether or not she was going to take her wheelchair down a large amount of stairs or
Right.
remove herself from the chair and climb to the top, and neither was going to work.
Did she scream at all, or was she just like
Well,
rolling
that's the
around
thing
trying to
about-
figure out what to do?
That's the
I,
thing
I
about
can't remember her in distress beyond.
right.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No. I'm just saying that's the thing about bad death scenes in a horror movie.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it's just like sometimes it's implied and it's done well, but there's not even a scream. There's nothing. There's no payoff.
No. And yeah, when people die in this, they don't seem all that scared. They're like,
No.
like, "Oh, really? Is that what's going to happen to me
no,
now? This is fine."
actors,
No
they're
actors.
not real
Exactly.
actors.
Well, the only one that I guess does have somewhat of a resume, has been in stuff, is the security guard.
Oh, right.
Right? Yeah, which is interesting because he has this like inside knowledge of what the killer's doing. The killer's trying to frame him, and he tells our lead, Barry, who he's not a great actor, but at least I understood why he was our principal, I guess, out of all the actors
Principal
involved.
actor. Yeah.
Yes. But the security guard like tells him stuff, and then later when he's interrogating him, he's like, "What are you hiding?" When it's like, "I'm hiding your knowledge, guy.
Yeah.
You told me stuff, and now you're hiding me in front of this
The
ridiculous detective who always has like a big gulp in his hand at all times."
Yeah.
You know that was his idea too. He's like,
yeah.
"Oh, my character needs the big gulp
Right.
at all times. That's my signature prop."
Terrible.
He was
detective.
terrible. I did not like that guy at all. I didn't hate the security guard. I mean, he has been in a lot of stuff. He's
Yeah.
okay.
What
He was probably the best actor, right? But
Right.
I don't-
What year was this movie made in? Because there's a character in it who
2010.
okay, there's a character who is like the cool girl, like the mean girl, cool girl.
And how
Well,
did they pick this actress to be Chelsea, who's essentially the front runner
right.
to become the president of the school?
But she doesn't
And-
look like she's in the right decade.
Exactly. And she doesn't look like she's a high school student. She
Do
looks
you
like
know-
she's a 35-year-old,
She reminded me like she maybe
anemic woman.
walked off the set of Napoleon Dynamite and ended up in this movie.
Yes.
You know?
Yeah, that's very appropriate. Didn't love her, but she was the best character next to the janitor to make memes out of because her actions were so big. She was
Right.
so over the top with everything she did. I don't know how many times she would just like bang a locker out of frustration or the table. It's just like
There was
huff.
there was
She
a
big
lot of that.
huffer.
There was a lot of that in the movie, and I don't. That's what these what these quote unquote actors thought acting is. But even like
Yeah.
the teacher comes up and he just puts his fist on the desk and like, guys, that's not
Yeah.
emotion or
It's too much.
that's
It's
not anger.
friends of friends who are willing to do it for free because we kind of buried the lead there. All of these actors were not paid. This entire movie cost $5,000. It's probably the cheapest thing that we've seen because even Skinamarink was $15,000. So at 5,000
That's a good
bones, it had a couple moments that I didn't hate for 5,000, and we both watched it. So you got to give it that in that it was smart enough to take a holiday that you get a day off for and turn it into a horror. There were some fun kills, and setting aside the characters like novel reactions to being murdered, or I don't even know how to put it, just
Right.
like not being scared. I did enjoy some of the makeup, specifically the one girl who has her nose ripped off by a hair straightener.
Oh my god.
It was super gooey and gory and fun, but I don't know how that would kill her because he kind of like just burns off her nose and pulls it off, but then she's dead. It's like,
yeah.
is the nose? Is
Nope.
that what keep me alive?
No,
is my
it's just
nose?
cartilage. It's
But that didn't make
I-
a lick of sense.
I think they thought that was clever. Like that. Well, I've never seen this done before.
Right.
That character also confused me because She was also running for class president. Yet I don't know. I don't know about you, but in my school, you didn't have like a person from every group or every clique running for class president. Like it wasn't something people wanted. Nobody wanted.
Definitely not. I mean, yeah, essentially our secondary lead is Joanna, who is this new girl who just arrived at the school, who Barry takes a liking to. But she's the new girl, and she's a little awkward herself, but she decides to run. She's running for president. And then you got the other girl there, who's kind of the goth one, who is just there so she can write an expose on who these candidates really are. Like, it's just, I can see how it was written in this writer's mind, and just like, okay, that's what this character is. And you get like the literal 2 lines of what that character is in the movie, sort of thing, and what their purpose is. It was frustrating.
Well, tell me, definitely. What are some other death scenes that you liked in this movie?
Well, it had a staple. 2 deaths were characters getting jammed in the throat or through the mouth into the throat.
Yeah.
With iconic the bass. You got the principal of the high school who always has a bass on him at all times.
Another actor's choice.
He's having meetings with the students and with the vice principal, who was a very interesting character herself. But he always has this black bass, and of course that gets rammed down his throat. And when we do find out who the killer is, I don't know if he could have physically done these kills.
No way. No way.
Yeah. Because while he's not the most rotund, you have the mascot of the school.
Another
and
fan
how did he
favorite.
die? Now I'm losing my memory of how he died. He takes off his little lammy head.
He was just in the gym waiting for the girl whose nose got burned off. He's waiting for her, and he had this little picnic set up with these maybe McDonald's cheeseburgers on plates, and he's like doing his routine, and then the janitor catches him. And
that's right.
The janitor's like, "You gotta get out of here. I'm gonna lock up." And the kid's like, okay. And he starts to pack up, and then the killer's just there.
He axes him, right?
Yeah.
I feel like he was axed.
Yeah, he was axed. That was another thing that didn't make sense, is like the killer was just at, I don't know if I think that maybe the janitor has to give an explanation, an exposition where he's like, "The game's been over for 2 hours. What are you doing here?" You're like, okay.
And the janitor very clearly lives there in the school.
Yeah.
When you see him in his office, it's just, the place reeks of everything that he is. Was there any redeemable kills for you? The janitor doesn't die, though, right? The janitor is one of the characters that actually survives this thing.
As far as I know, right.
Okay. Yeah, I can't remember his...
He had nothing to do with the election. Only people involved somehow with the election were murdered.
Yeah. So let's talk about the ending here, and who our big bad is. And it turns out to be the history teacher, which in theory is good. We got President's Day. In theory, this is clever-ish. Like, it could have been more clever if it wasn't for the casting and how it wouldn't have been feasible for this pretty old-ish man, probably 60, with his red bow tie, who's then able to, like, do all that in a really horrible, cheap plastic mask where I don't know how he's breathing while chasing these people down. How is he chasing these people down at that age, sort of thing? And then explain to me why he did that. He ultimately, he fixes the election in the end.
I think
because Barry was supposed to win.
He was in love with that girl.
That's what it is?
He had a shrine to her.
But then he does kill her when she's like, "Well, you're gross."
Right. When he's quote unquote rejected. But
that's pretty fickle love. I don't know.
Don't you think throughout the movie, though, the scenes where the killer's there, that they had like a different actor, or I say actor in the mask? Or...
Absolutely.
You know, the thing that the thing that I didn't like is that the killer, the teacher, who's in love with his own dog, kills his dog. And it didn't seem necessary. And then when asked about it, he's like, there's going to be sacrifices.
I had to do what I had to do.
Yeah, there's like sacrifices in every war or something like that.
Right.
You didn't need to kill your dog.
It didn't make any sense that he actually thought he had a shot with this 16-year-old or whatever, and like her entire future is dependent on whether or not she becomes the president.
The class
And
president.
I don't know, there might have been a little racism in that man too, is what I was feeling, the way that he
Yes.
kind of dogged Barry there. Um,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, I could never suggest people watch this unless you're looking for a bad movie to watch. Like sometimes it is fun to just toss in something that is
Yeah.
subpar, so you can Mystery Science Theater it. This would be a beautiful MSK or Mystery Science Theater
I agree. I agree.
film, right?
Completely.
Just
Yes. Or Riff Tracks. Riff Tracks does it too.
oh,
Another-
really? Yeah, that'd be a perfect movie for that.
Yeah.
I'm glad it was made because you got to give them props for putting together this thing with only $5,000, and there are some aspects that are a little redeemable. I do like the concept of the history teacher dressing up as Lincoln, killing people, killing kids and adults too, but the motive is where you lose me, sort of thing. He's in love with Chelsea, which it's wrong. It's just wrong.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
It's terrible.
Well, we got through talking about that one somehow.
somehow
we did it.
Somehow. It's something else I noticed about the movies. I thought it felt like it really wanted to be like American Pie. Also, the style of music that ran throughout it.
The music was horrible.
Yes.
It was so bad. I mean, there was a lot of just punk music
Yes.
that almost was like louder than the
Garage.
dialogue, and it was like obviously hit the director writer's band or his
Oh, yeah.
buddy's band who's like, I'm putting it in there. Let's listen to punk while Abraham Lincoln slaughters a disabled student. You know, it doesn't gel for me. It doesn't gel.
No. Let's talk about a movie on the complete opposite end of the spectrum.
Yes.
A Hollywood-funded movie with
Yes.
actually a really surprisingly good cast. I mean, there are a
No
lot
joke.
of notable actors in this.
That's for sure. A lot of them like surprised me when they popped up
Yeah.
too. When I saw Alan Tudyk
Alan
out of
Tudyk,
nowhere.
Jimmy Simpson. You know him from like a lot
Yes.
of stuff, but yeah.
He's a huge. I'm drinking milk right now, my man, and he's a huge fan of milk, and It's Always Sunny.
Yeah.
So
The McPoyles.
yeah, you mentioned Mary Elizabeth Winstead, who is now, I would say, I think we should do a cast in the future about current day scream queens, and I think she could be up there between Cloverfield Lane
Yeah.
and her, role in Fargo. She's fun, and of course she was in that Tarantino one about the car with Kurt Russell as the driver.
Death Proof. Yeah.
Death Proof, yes. So she's got some chops in that department, and and she is Mary Todd. So that casting, I would say, is not super appropriate.
No. Mary Todd.
Because that wasn't what Mary Todd.
Historically, not Mary Elizabeth Winstead.
Yeah.
That's how I'll say it
Yeah.
nicely.
But you can get past that because it's really about our man here, Benjamin Walker. Were you familiar with this guy who plays Lincoln?
No, I was not, and I thought he did a really good job considering.
Especially old Lincoln, the makeup I thought was phenomenal.
Yeah.
Like it really looked great in the latter half.
Yeah.
First half, I wasn't really buying the look, but when you have old Lincoln, I was there with it. And granted, you don't see pictures of young Lincoln, so you gotta cut them some slack on that, I guess.
Yeah. The crazy thing is though that this actor Benjamin Walker is now on the Amazon Lord of the Rings show.
Really?
Yeah. He's like the
Mara had remembered him from That Thing You Do. I guess he has a big part in that
Oh.
Tom Hanks flick.
yeah.
I think I saw, but it wasn't a memorable movie to me, so I didn't recognize him. But I
No.
didn't mind him. I thought,
No, I thought he was.
Despite the ridiculous premise,
Yeah.
he executed this role to the best of the ability.
Yeah.
Yeah. But you're right. Then you got Rufus Sewell, who everybody is probably aware of,
If
as
you're
our
not-
big bad.
Yeah, and if you're not familiar by name, if you saw a picture of him immediately, you'd be like, "Oh, that guy's in everything."
He really is. And I like him as a bad guy better than a good. My favorite movie of his by far is Dark City.
Oh yeah.
That movie is so good. That's also horror-ish too. It's a head trip. But you got him in his motive here is a little bland for me, and it's ultimately just we want to spread vampirism.
Yeah.
And rhetorically, I have issues with this because if he is the top dog, is he going to sustain his power if he starts turning everybody into vampires? You know what I mean? It just doesn't work in terms of who they make this big bad out to be. What's the character's name? Sewell? Oh, no, that's his name. What's his character's name? Listen in here. Adam. Okay, that's right, because he's the first.
Interesting name for him.
Yes, yeah. But I honestly liked his lackey, his evil girlfriend, way more as a character. I thought...
Oh, isn't that his sister?
Is it his sister? Okay, all right.
I think it's his sister. But do you think
What's
they
it?
named him Adam because he's like the first vampire?
That's what I'm assuming is the case, yeah.
It just doesn't make sense to me because...
Yeah, how does that work? Did God create Adam the vampire?
He talks about,
or...
being around Egypt and
Oh, yeah.
seeing the slavery there.
Yeah, there was some intricacies within the actual story, and I could see how they might have wanted to build a verse with this. I just think it's such a hard sell.
Yeah.
Like, as somebody who loves horror and action and all that stuff, I had no desire to see this in 2012 when it came out. And, as the huge Buffy the Vampire Slayer fan that I am, it would seem like I would be the target audience. Did you see it when it came out initially?
No, not immediately, but I think it was something like I rented. Like I think
You did?
Yeah.
Okay.
Just because of how interesting the cover is, and I think I had heard of the book, but because I remember at that moment it was really popular for that style of literature. There was Abraham Lincoln, Hunter. Then there was like Pride, Prejudice, and Zombies. And these books, I think,
historical horror fiction
I
sort of
think
thing.
they were all like published around the same time, and like I remember people talking about them. And then, I think I knew more about the director, who's a Russian director who did Night Watch and Day Watch first.
Oh, wow, okay.
He kind of came to fame with those movies, and this was like the perfect vehicle to bring in like a foreign director who had done some like horror action stuff. Because there's some crazy epic scenes in this movie.
Yes, I completely agree. In terms of the effects, it's really great, and you do see the influence of Tim Burton in the dark gothic aspect that does go on. I don't think I'll watch it again, though. I liked it. I got through it. I mean, when you're comparing it to stuff like President's Day, it's freaking Oscar worthy. For me, if you don't have a villain with a motive I can understand, you lose me a little bit. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That was the biggest hang up for me was that. And then some of the really obvious stuff that they tried to play off as not obvious, like Dominic Cooper's character, Henry Sturgis, being a vampire. It's like, oh, really?
Yeah.
That everyone saw that coming, sort of thing.
I don't know.
That sort of thing where I just feel like it's considering its audience to be dumb, and I hated that part about it.
Yeah. I don't know if it's because I had seen it before that didn't necessarily bother me as much, because I think it was more his motive than like the actual reveal that he was a vampire, because I think we were all like, when you first see him, well, not his first, the first time you see him is in the bar with Lincoln,
right?
But the first time you see him show his powers, he throws
he throws that one dude like through the boathouse.
I think everyone who's watching that moment's like, well, this guy's a vampire. But there's also a weird thing in this movie that they do not necessarily nail down or beat you over the head with, is vampires are allowed to walk outside, I think, as long as you wear sunblock.
That's ridiculous. I don't like that at all.
That's my flaw with this movie, is that you really didn't even explain it.
I'm going to say one thing that I really liked, and I wish they kind of played this up earlier in the movie, was equating the Confederates to the Nazis, or having the Confederate army utilize the evil vampires, that I appreciate. I thought that was interesting, to embed vampires into the side you want to win, so you can continue to perpetuate that evil. I dug that. I did enjoy that action, and like you said, the action sequences were worth a damn.
Pretty epic. The horses, they're running on the horses.
What do you think about the subplot between Mary Todd and that lady vampire?
I think this subplot could have been thrown out the window, but you need it.
I think so too.
You know, like
but
you need
the
it.
payoff there at the end, their showdown at the end, I liked.
Yeah.
But the whole little gimmick with the little sword because she kills one of the kids, which is interesting because Lincoln did have kids that just dropped dead really young. One at 12, Willie. Do you remember the name of the son that they kill off in this one?
The one in this movie, I think,
Just
is
Tad or
Willie.
Eddie? It is Willie.
I
Okay,
think
so
it
he
is
died
Willie.
of typhoid, which kind of makes sense in that he's stricken with vampirism, and they have to put him out of his misery.
Yeah.
I like that angle. It's nothing new sort of thing, but it was okay. It did feel like it went on a little long for me, if I'm honest.
Yeah.
Well,
and
but-
what's interesting is that they do a major time jump. The Lincoln puts away his axe,
right.
and then the next thing you know, like he's 50 in his 50s,
Uh-huh.
and I completely understand why. But to your point, it feeling long, you probably could have avoided that when you've got like a major time jump like that.
Yeah, and I guess it all really revolves around him having witnessed his mom be murdered by this vampire that he's
Right.
essentially
Sets things-
desirous to get revenge upon. But of course, we have this Sturgis character here, like who's his babysitter, I guess, or his taskmaster of sorts, who says, "No, you can't kill him until I say it's okay."
Yeah.
Little
because-
silly. I don't know. As an independent,
Well-
confident man as Lincoln is, I don't know why he's taking orders from this guy.
I think it's because Henry Sturgis's motive is that he constantly uses people. He needs
Right.
people to try and kill all the vampires because he can't, which was an interesting idea. But
Yeah, I'll give you that.
yeah, I mean, like, because even the very end of the movie, he's kind of like, it kind of feels like Interview with a Vampire, where they jump into modern day, and he's, finding somebody new to pass the baton to, and
Right. Yeah. In terms of the vampire that he is going after, I did like the steel ball in his eye when he gets shot, and then that just bullet is there for the rest of the
Yeah, I
movie.
like that
I
he-
enjoyed that
he
for some
left it.
reason.
mm-hmm.
I dug that. But the other thing I wanted to mention about this one is I didn't actually look at the numbers. I should have, but I don't see how this has appeal outside of the United States. Really, Abraham Lincoln being just like so American.
Yeah.
Obviously, that how do you sell this to a wider audience?
That's a great point, and I would like to kind of curious to see how it did overseas, but I don't know. I mean, I think people learn little chunks of American history outside of the world, and I imagine Abraham Lincoln's one of them. It's one of our most.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I don't
Great
know
question,
either.
though.
That
Yeah,
there's a reason I didn't go see it in the theater during a
Right.
time when I saw everything in the theater, sort
Right.
of thing.
right.
It was something up. Nevertheless, it was worth a watch. It's what it got, 5.9 on IMDb out of 10, and I personally think that's about right.
Yeah, and
about
I
a
think
6 out of 10.
as far as this really bizarre subgenre of horror where involving presidents, it is, if not the best, one of the best
Yeah.
offers in this category.
Oh, absolutely. Versus this FDR American Badass,
Mm.
that seems like complete waste of time. Anything else you want to mention on this puppy?
I don't think so, although I am surprised they didn't try to make this into more of a series, like straight to video type of a situation where, you've got all these subplots. And I really would have liked to have seen John Wilkes Booth, and then find out that he's also a vampire.
Yes,
Like,
that would be cool.
I think
yes.
I think as an audience member, you're kind of not hoping, but I think connecting those dots, like, oh, this would make sense if Wilkes Booth was a vampire.
That was a missed opportunity.
Yeah.
But then you don't have your happy ending because then the vampire does beat Abraham. So instead we get this tongue-in-cheek, Mary, it's time to go to the theater.
Where's my hat?
What's going to happen there, I wonder? Yeah, exactly.
my
That
hat?
bothered me. And right before that happened, you have the Sturgis character saying,
Offering.
I'll turn you into a vampire so we can kick butt together
Yeah.
forever. You want to stay with me forever?
Yeah.
They're not going to turn Mary, so how's Mary going to feel about him getting this vampire on?
Yeah, it's a weird moment because you kind of know already that how Abe thinks about vampires, and that I think throughout the movie you know that he would never actually switch to the dark side, but you almost need to address the fact that, like, well, he's going to die, but he was offered eternal life.
Plus, it might have been touching on something that I really hadn't heard until the comedy Bros that came out this last year.
Oh, yeah, I haven't seen that yet.
In it, the main character, he works like an LGBT museum, and he's trying to emphasize how it was likely that Lincoln was gay, because it's well documented that he often would sleep in the same bed as other men.
Yeah.
And, the other people were like, it's not enough, we can't run with that sort of thing. But if that's something that's been in the ether prior to this movie, maybe with this vampirism and their kind of real intimate relationship, it might have had that additional layer that I wouldn't have picked up upon if it wasn't for Bros.
Right. There could have been, a missed opportunity for some sort of love story, like a at the time, it was never accepted. That would have been another layer of just sadness. But I think I had heard that, and isn't that why there's another Republican Party, like the Log Cabin Republicans?
Oh,
I think I'm not sure. It's a group of people who have the same ideals as Lincoln, but also gay.
Yeah, I hadn't heard of that. The only last thing I want to mention, because we mentioned Jimmy Simpson at the top, who he's at Westworld now. He's got an amazing career now.
Yeah.
He's taken off, but this is when he was still the milkman from Sunny.
Always Sunny, yeah.
But where this movie I do give it a credit, is I really did think he'd turned on Lincoln. I was like, they were setting it up. That was like one of the directions where, opposite to me realizing his buddy was a vampire, in terms of Jimmy Simpson's character, he got me when he was like, no, I was doing that old double cross thing. Didn't see that coming, and I appreciate it. And Jimmy Simpson pulled it off.
They did a great job with that as well, because there's a really great moment at Lincoln's wedding where Lincoln's talking to Will, and he's saying, "You're the only family I have," and you cut to Jimmy Simpson's face, and you kind of feel bad. You're like, Speedy's been there with you too.
But Speedy seemed like he was a little racist, because when you do have, we didn't even mention Anthony Mackie is Lincoln's African American friend, and Jimmy Simpson's character seemed to have issues with that.
I think you're right.
But I mean, that makes sense time wise. So like you'd think he would have learned from at that point. Anyways, let's move on to the Washingtonians, shall we?
Yes.
Had you seen this? I felt like I had seen all of the Masters of Horror, but maybe I missed a lot in the second season because I didn't remember it.
No, I had never seen this one, and I have only seen chunks of Masters with Horror, like specific episodes that I've never seen them all the way through, like I have with Tales from the Crypt.
I'm surprised you're such a horror anthology man. That seems like it would have been right up your alley.
I think it's always been an accessibility thing, and I know that Masters of Horror was a Showtime. I've never been like a Showtime subscriber. So.
Gotcha.
And weirdly enough, I don't think it's streaming anywhere. I could be wrong about that.
Okay. It looks like it's on Freevee.
Oh, okay.
Which I think is Prime's
Amazon Prime
commercial
bought,
version.
IMDb's streaming platform, and they just turned it into Freevee and consumed it.
I definitely had seen a lot of them, and I like a lot because specifically one of my favorite directors writes for it, and that's Mick Garris, who's the writer-director of May, who I'm sure I brought up multiple times. Probably my favorite character horror adaptation of Frankenstein, that's contemporary, really unique at the same time, despite being kind of a Frankenstein-esque reimagining. So there are some interesting ideas in this, and I credit the writers for going interesting directions with the mythos of Washington and how he wasn't the man that we thought he was.
Yeah, I thought it was very original.
It was. I think it was ham-handed the way that they went about telling us. Ultimately, he finds this letter, scroll,
whatever it is.
in a picture of Washington, a little on the point there,
Yeah.
and a portrait of Washington after I guess his grandma died.
Yeah.
So he's sifting through all her stuff in this other town, comes across this, and they're like, whoa, was this maybe actually Washington? And of course the note said something along the lines of, I eat people.
Right.
I love to eat people, and people are delicious. That's the, Cliff Notes.
Yeah. Now, is this the movie you're saying? Because the star of this short film is from That Thing You Do.
Oh, really? Oh, okay. You know what? Maybe that's
Okay.
right. That makes more sense. Okay.
Because this actor,
Yeah, I think I'd be.
he's popped up throughout. I think he's like always had a pretty consistent career, but you don't see him as often. Weirdly, and
I didn't recognize him at all, if I'm
Okay.
honest with you.
okay.
And yes, you're absolutely right. This is the thing I do. And he was also married to Christina Applegate. this guy.
Interesting.
I hadn't seen him. He was okay. He didn't leave a lasting impact on me. Nobody did in this. I feel like they needed at least one heavy hitter to kind of like,
Yeah.
maybe just even give me, the really creepy old man who essentially is the estate manager. Put somebody in that role that could really sell this concept and make me scared
Sure.
instead of essentially what turns out to be like a parody of the Tea Party, I felt like, with them all wearing their hats. And
Powdered
so you
wigs.
essentially have a George Washington Society of cannibals who are so proud of their being cannibals, yet they want to hide the fact that Washington was a cannibal. It
Yeah.
seems so contradictory to... I struggled with that a lot.
I agree with you there. Although it does seem that because that there's historians, we are introduced to one, that it has been a rumor throughout history. So they haven't done the best job of keeping this under wraps.
Right.
And I don't know. I completely agree with you. It does seem contradictory. And they love eating children and turning their bones into silverware. That's what I got from it.
Yes, that's right. Not only do they find the scroll, but they find a fork
Made from
that's
bone,
made
I
out of
imagine.
human bone.
Yeah.
You know what? I'm going to take it back. They do have one actor that's really recognizable, and this is another instance where I thought the character was going to be bad, and then he turned out to be good, and that's Saul Rubinek, the actor, his character.
That's the
He's kind of a
historian,
heavy
right?
hitter.
The
Yes, Professor Harkinson.
Yes.
He did give a little bit of credibility to this, I would say. But I did think he was going to, betray them. I thought he was like in on it, trying to get the scroll.
Yeah.
But it turned out he wasn't. And he has connections with like secret military factions that will then go in there and blow away all of these Tea Party Washington cannibals.
They wiped them out, no question.
Oh, the cut in that is just so funny. Because you got this one guy, he reminds me of, what is it? Todd, not Gack. What's the guy who's Olaf, the snowman from Frozen?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, Josh Gad. It was he just like all the characters looked like was Josh Gad doing over the top Washington to me.
That's a great call.
and then they just smoke them all.
Yeah.
All thanks to Professor Harkinson, who has these wicked connections, and enough so that the word does get out. It is a happy ending, and that now people know the true story behind Washington's atrocities.
Now,
I did like kind of the backstory that they gave us, and like how when he was at war, they were out of rations or whatever, so he did have to resort to cannibalism. But then he was like, this ain't bad.
Yeah,
this ain't bad.
The Valley Forge, and I completely agree that the backstory was cool, and I think the lore was cool. But the confusing thing is that when you do an anthology series and when you do it really well, you don't have to have a happy ending. You do not need to resolve everything because it ends here. I really would have liked to have seen some sort of lingering continuation.
I agree.
Not everything.
More of a horror trope that you expect at the end.
Yes.
But I'm going to come back to you, and I'm going to argue that it's not a happy ending.
Okay.
Because as is revealed in the final shot, George Washington is no longer on the dollar bill, but
Yeah.
an even more sinister George is, and that's George W. Baby.
That was weird to me. That
It
to me wasn't like, especially in the last 10 years, I don't look at George W. Bush as the worst president anymore. Now,
No, that's a really good point.
I
You're
think
absolutely right.
when
This is 2007 when it came
Yes.
out, aired January 2007. So
yes, I think when they
the
made
notorious Trump wasn't around at that point.
this
So
episode does not age well for that fact alone, because now you can watch it
Right.
and be like, that doesn't seem so bad.
yes,
um,
he was a warmonger though. So
oh no! I'm just saying it will not age well.
No,
And
definitely
he
not.
was, again, not the greatest president, and he did do.
I think that's what hurts Masters of Horror is a lot of them don't hold up.
right.
I feel like when I've rewatched them. And I'm sorry to cut you off.
No. I was gonna say I just don't think that was the best ending. I think there should have been. Yeah, maybe there's another storyline where the professor and that murder squad were really trying to protect it for another reason. That's
Yeah, like
They
it
were
would
the
have made
actual
more sense
holders
for
of
the
power.
government to want to hide it
yes.
and not the cannibals. Like
yes.
they should have swapped that, where the cannibals want people to know this is who Washington was,
Right.
and that this government faction wants to keep it under
Normalize.
wraps to keep the image of America strong.
Yeah.
But we get the opposite of that, which really hurts it.
Normalize eating people is what their message should have been.
Right. That would have been more intriguing and logical, I guess would be the word.
Yeah.
There's some fun moments in it, though. It's worth a watch just for some of these ridiculous, creepy old people, specifically when they're at the funeral.
Yes.
And you have there's two really creepy old ladies in it
yeah.
who
The
are just
diner
like
lady.
drooling over their daughter, this little girl. And then they throw in at the end how the virgin meat is the tastiest of meat. And it's like, do we need that? How
Nope.
about just young meat?
Yep.
Why does it? Why do you have to bring that into it?
Yeah. Super weird.
It just seemed unnecessary, because it added an element that was like creepy and unnecessary creepy. These old people just like lecturing on this poor little girl.
And what's really interesting is like even before you're introduced to how creepy they are. So back it up. You just show up at this wake or funeral rather, and there's something creepy about. There's like no young people. That
Right.
is the creepy part. They've all been
Yes.
eaten or whatever. That to
Right.
me is the creepiest part. It's like there's something just very eerie. You're like, where are all the young people?
Yeah.
You
It
know?
reminded me of that horror we watched that was, I think it was German or something, where all the old people go crazy and start killing
Yeah,
people.
Yes.
All killing all the young people. It had like that does it way better than this does it, because they didn't have to like
Yeah.
dig into this Washington nonsense.
Yeah.
But I enjoyed it. I was glad compared to the other ones. It was only 55 minutes and
Yeah. And I think
gave me what it needed to give me.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of the overall message here is that some of these lesser known holidays or less celebrated holidays, if you're going to do horror, maybe it's done better for like a shorter, episodic take on it. Like an anthology series,
Right.
Like what Blumhouse did with their Hulu series.
Right. I almost think they could have truncated this to a Tales of the Crypt 30-minute-er, and it would have been
This was like 55 minutes
better.
or something like that runtime.
Right.
And yeah, you're right. It could have been.
I mean, after watching President's Day, it was a work of art. But
Like they didn't. There's something weird about them. Like they were at the grandma and grandpa's house, and they're like, "We got to get the hell out of here." And they go back to their house. Like, well, that seemed weird to me. That they could have just kept everything there in the town. They should have been forced to have stayed. And just like.
yeah, they bust out, then they're back at their own home, and now the girl's sleeping in her own bed, and there's a creepy Washingtonian outside of her window.
Yeah.
And then you get this most ridiculous moment where he's at the peephole looking out, and there's them all with the fish hook lens.
See, in
just
that moment,
killing.
I didn't know that. I thought they were ghosts.
That would have been better
It
than
would've
these
been
just
better.
crazy.
They've got the powder on. They've got the wigs, the old
Right.
like outfits. I think it would have been cool if they were like also protecting this secret that they unleashed the spirits of the Washingtonians.
That would have been more interesting.
Yeah.
But we don't get that. Instead, we get
didn't.
essentially the Trumpers of a sort at a different time in a way. And I do want to mention the wooden teeth part because you mentioned the wigs
Yeah.
and stuff.
Yeah.
Because there's this always been this myth, because it's not even true, that he had wooden teeth, Washington.
Right.
He did not have wooden teeth. He had gold dentures or ivory dentures. What's even worse than wooden teeth is he would actually put other humans' teeth in his mouth
See,
to use.
that
So
right
that's
there is a really good story detail. Like, he's eating people. Maybe he
Yes.
takes their teeth.
that would be cool. Yes, that
He's,
would
He's searching for like
take
the
it to the
right
next level.
set of teeth.
Yes,
I love that.
because when the one Washingtonian lifts the jar
Yeah,
top so it unveils his teeth, and the way that he like sniffs it,
yeah,
it was just so weird. Like when you get into this Washington
agree.
Museum where they're all eating people, it's just the tone shifted when they like grabbed the wife and said, "Tell us where the scroll is," and then they like make like they're cutting her cheek, but
yeah,
it's like they just smeared ketchup on her. It
Right.
was just so bad. It was
Yeah.
that was not my favorite moment.
agreed.
Is there a worst holiday to base a horror movie on?
Flag Day. Think what you
Yeah,
could do
that
with
might be bad. I was gonna say Arbor Day, but actually Arbor Day, there might
Arbor
be
Day,
something
you could
there.
Probably make something out. of
You
Arbor
could
Day.
probably.
In fact,
Yeah.
I think years ago, Funny or Die did a short movie, or a horror movie trailer about Arbor Day, and it was about the
Really?
trees being upset they were getting chopped down, and like it was. Look that up.
The
but,
trees are fighting back. Isn't that The Happening by M. Night Shyamalan?
Yeah, basically.
Speaking of which, I'm excited to watch his new one, even though it's getting the mixed
Yeah,
reviews.
Knock at the Cabin.
But I mean, I think we said everything we need to say. Just let
Yeah.
them know. I think next week we're going to come at you with Infinity Pool. We're going to talk about as well as
Cronenberg, yeah.
yes, right. It's David Cronenberg's son,
Brandon, yeah.
Brandon Cronenberg, who I really liked in the last one he directed with Jennifer Jason Leigh.
Yeah, yeah. We talked about that.
What
one.
was
yeah.
that called? Resurrection, Possession.
Possessor.
Really dug that.
Possessor?
Possessor. Yeah,
Something
okay.
like that. Yeah, Possessor.
That was cool. I really enjoyed that because it just looked and felt like its own thing.
Yeah.
Like, yes, it had his dad's influence on it, but you could see that he was really trying to have his own voice in it. That's why I'm excited about this one, because the players are fun too. You know, give me a Skarsgård and a horror since True Blood, as that happens. Don't.
Well, you've got other Skarsgårds in horror. You've got.
That's fair. Yes, that's true.
But we're all, like you said, you're about to say, we're also going to cover some other horror movies and other horror offerings that we're excited about for the rest of this year. Because
Yes.
there's a lot.
Last year, we gave you the up and comings for 2022. We're a little behind the curve on this one, but we're going to highlight that which excites us and might be under your radar and is not on everybody's list of the best ones coming. We're going to try and find some more unique ones for y'all,
So you're definitely
as we
gonna
did
wanna,
last.
Yeah, you're definitely going to want to tune in next week. But until then, I would suggest that you
Stay alive.